Yes, good early morning, good afternoon, good evening. Trumpeter's Philosopher Corner. So, greetings again, back in the chair. The rantings of a composer. Hopefully not a ranting. Interesting discussion point this morning, thinking about music, but also thinking about, in the wider sense, the terminologies that we use about art. So art, subjective or non-subjective art. So when I've been reading about famous buildings like the Taj Mahal in India, most people would assume that is a piece of art. And when I say that, you might say, well, no, that's a building or a famous building. But the design of that building would be impressive. That's an important emotional reaction. Impressive to most of the people who would encounter it. I haven't had that privilege. I've encountered things like, at first hand, like the pyramids, or the Vatican, or Buckingham Palace, or Versailles. But nevertheless, that's not what we would relate to as being subjective art. So objective art is art universally, and I mean there can be exceptions on that point, but universally accepted as art by 99.9% of the population. So subjective art, when you go to a museum, you go to the abstract art section, you see blue. I saw that in Stuttgart in Germany. It was pointed out to me that it was a very specific hue that was specifically designed, etc., etc. So there was a narrative attached to it, and not to detract from the people who invented it, I can't recall the artist that we attributed that work to, but blue was basically a square of blue on a white canvas, and it's in an abstract art museum. Of course, one part of my body, DNA, goes, well, give me some acrylic paint, some rulers, if you've got maybe some masking tape, and I can sort of generate that. And I've heard people counter the argument, say, well, you didn't generate that. And then if you read the history of that particular work, there was a lot of, to develop a particular type of blue, you go to any paint shop and see all the different types of colors. So I belittle, by my ignorance, what was involved in that. I still don't think it's amazing. The story of trying to do something different is amazing. So the story behind what I saw is amazing, but the actual artifact, I wasn't overtly impressed. Now that's me personally. The curator of the museum or the art gallery would obviously find a great point of difference there, especially the price tag that went with it, many thousands of euros. And it's wonderful when there's a historical narrative of something really interesting, the Mona Lisa being stolen at one point or a couple of times. It makes it a very interesting piece of information attached to an artwork. But objective art, I could just go to the gallery at the Louvre and be interested in the art piece itself. I believe, but can't verify historically, but I believe that the Leonardo da Vinci has reputedly worked on the smile of the lady that's featured and reworked it over almost a decade. I wasn't around and I can't easily verify that fact, so I could be wrong on that point. Michelangelo, when I went to the Vatican Museum one time, there was a whole hall on the last part of the gallery, art gallery on a third floor, I think, and it was full of all the masters. They're all in there. And one painting stood out to me, and I'm glad that I was drawn to it from a distance. I couldn't read the label or the name, and I'm not 100% au fait with Michelangelo's style, but it was a Michelangelo. I'm sure any of the masters' paintings resonate with people at different levels. I had an emotional response to it, that I thought that was something outstanding of what I'd seen, and then I was pleasantly surprised that I'd chosen a Michelangelo. Do I know enough about his technique of painting and his renown and his... No, I don't. So you hear a piece of Mozart, you hear a piece of Beethoven, 99.9% of the population may not own a record of those two great iconic composers, but they would agree, if they were honest with themselves, that that is objectively good art. It harmonises, it resonates, and it embodies powerful sentiment, emotional. And that music's been around now for centuries. So I can go to another concert. A city like Cologne would have a avant-garde concert or something on, and I can be left like I felt in Stuttgart with the blue square. I can see technique in the artistry of the musicians. I can see the enthusiasm of the audience that's participating and engaging with this and looking for this kind of musical outlet. And I can sit there, and I personally can either, and I'm being really honest here, can either resonate or not resonate with it. In fact, often my brain says, like I was in the Stuttgart, surely I could get a ruler out and measure it up on some masking tape and organise that if I wanted to. Can you hear that little voice coming back? Well, you didn't, and this composer did, etc., etc. So, and I have witnessed the enthusiasm of some of these more abstract neo-classical or very contemporary classical works, and I think the audience seemed to be people were thoroughly enjoying it. I wasn't thoroughly enjoying it, but I was interested. I mean, the artistry of the concert pianist and the violinist executing this music. I don't mean executing in a negative way, but actually performing it quite technically brilliantly. Even stops, they use elbows on the lid of the piano, etc. Interesting to watch, not objectively resonating with me, didn't speak to me. Like if I walk down a street and I see some maybe classic architecture type buildings or something from a colonial period or even earlier Georgian period, Victorian period, Anglified actually when I talk like this, I might look at the balustrades or the curvatures and the way they do the facades on buildings. As you know, most buildings, when you go behind them, are just boxes, but they spend a lot of effort, particularly on facades and things, in the Baroque period and other periods. So what am I impressed with? I'm impressed with the technique, the design of it. Yeah, so now I'm eliciting a couple of little clues about how I operate and how I resonate. I might respect a building. Again, I may not resonate with it, and that to me is a more subconscious and emotional response to something. And if I don't resonate to a piece of architecture, and it could be from a more classical period or an earlier period than the 20th century, it doesn't mean at all that the architecture work is not superb. It's just that I don't resonate with it. So there's this sort of emotional reaction that I guess a person has to something, and then there's an appreciation and a respect. I thought the Vatican was over the top, but then, Baroque period, and being the symbol of the lead cathedral of the Catholic Church, nothing was spared, and it's amazing, but I'm not comfortable there for too long. It's a little bit busy for me, and the Baroque was overindulgence in many ways, and the music. I like ornamentation in music too. When I write music, I do not I'm not of that era and I don't put that much in. So getting back to subjective, objective art, so Vatican would represent the first category, objective art. It's 99%. It's amazing. It leaves you spellbound. And then there's my personal side that, yes, I've spent half an hour in this enclosure. I need to go somewhere because I'm more drawn to nature, and that's just me personally. If I can sit in by a forest stream in the mountains or rainforest, etc., and I can be in a much happier place. That's just the way my DNA works, or on a beach or something like that. And I don't, but I'm not ignorant to the fact that these places exist, and they do amaze you. So this way of doing music leads me to my next slight topic, talking about fine art and commercial. So I've got two new categories. I've talked about subjective art and objective art, and I hope I haven't confused everybody. It's a little bit confusing. So in music, and I'll just draw a really simple example. The blues, which was a combination of the immigration into the United States, the melting pot of cultures, the Afro-American cultures and the European cultures in particular, and post the Civil War and the availability of instruments, etc. And the 1-4-5 progression, as we commonly know it as a blues, basic blues, which was made popularised very much, well, was popularised in the 40s, 30s as well, and even the 20s. Actually, I can hear Louis Armstrong doing 12-bar blue breaks back in the 20s with his band The Hot Five. But in the 1950s, when the rock and roll era came about, that was the spine of the kind of writing. There's a million, I can't tell you how many songs, commercial songs, rely on the 1-4-5 progression. That progression wasn't invented in America. You'll find plenty of examples in Beethoven's music and other great classical composers, Mozart, etc. The idea of it's just we're on a chord 1 and we go to a chord 4, we go to a chord 5, and it just feels good. It's a nice way to finish. It's a nice interval, a comfortable interval to listen to for most people. And creative people have taken that and made unbelievable variations on that theme. And we have the rise of the commercial music industry and all the technology and all the other side to it. So meanwhile, composers, and we're talking early 20th century, continuing the traditions of the previous masters, Stravinsky's and Messiaen and other people post-war, World War I, and then into World War II, and then even the Gershwins and later composers of the 20th century, Leonard Bernstein's. I'm just talking about some very famous ones that are known, but then there's Ennio Morricone, for instance, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, and all those spaghetti westerns, John Williamson, Schindler's List and all that sort of stuff. And then there's a whole group of composers through academia, through just art, the art movement, writing in postmodern styles of contemporary music into the avant-garde, as we've alluded to before. So if you write that kind of music, and unless you're a big name or followed at a very niche level, you are fairly obscure. If you write a good pop song, let's take Locomotion or something, and some famous exponent of that, Kylie Minogue, grabs it and puts it on video, and you've got $1 million hits, and that are wide known and spread, etc., etc. So the point that I'm making here is that the fine arts could be indigenous music. All indigenous musics are fine arts. Ballets that are written, orchestral works, they're all examples of art. Now, let's go back to the first break down the objective versus the subjective. And I think just because I sit and pen a piece of orchestral music or chamber work or something, it could actually end up being a subjective piece of music. It could be just a very myself, could be the only fan. Sometimes I'm not a fan of what I write, and that's an interesting point. It could just be a very subjective. I've been out in the forest. I've had an experience. I've tried to express it. Other people can't really understand it. So it can't really be necessarily very objective because, as I was alluding to before, that when most people can identify that art as being objectively good, even if they don't have the record at home, as I talked about the Taj Mahal or something, there's an amazement, there's an appreciation there. Mozart's music will stay many, hopefully forever, many more centuries, Beethoven, etc. I could pen something, put some chords down, and it could be very subjective. I might have a paid audience to come along and clap or something. I don't do that, but you could imagine that a small group of people might subjectively like it and the masses don't like it. So I guess the topic that I'm touching on here is, does something have to be widespread? Isn't pop music widespread? Isn't like 99% of the people might not be into that dance music? We talked about locomotion or something like that. And therefore, because of its high popularity, it's objective art. And this is a bit of a, there's a caveat here that it's easy with something like Beethoven's Ninth, Song of Joy, as most people know it. It's lasted 2 or 3 centuries. Will the kids be singing variations of locomotion into the 23rd century and something? That's a question I'll leave you to consider. So, am I arguing that something has to be around for centuries? Or is the fact that it's been appreciated over many centuries that ticks the box in terms that it is objective art? Because it's not just people of one particular orientation, generation, context, it's other generations coming forward. Young people have their music, millennials, different to X, different to baby boomers, and it's a mark of their era, and it doesn't mean that somebody in the next century, the 22nd century, can't be a fundai and an absolute fan of something from 1960s era or 70s, etc., like that. But that's art for another purpose. It's the expression of contemporary art. The next generation, that's the generation that's up and running at the moment, in 20, 30 years' time, they'll hang on to that, like our generation in general hangs on to, and then there'll be another wave of creativity and style coming through. My father used to wear very wide ties. That was in the 1970s when I was growing up. And by the time I got to finish school, we were in thin ties. And so if I see somebody with a thin tie, it takes me back to the 80s for good or bad points on that. So, have I meandered too far here? Perhaps a little. And then another espresso forthcoming would be awesome. But I'm thinking we have objective art, subjective art, we have commercial art, and we have fine art. So I haven't got a diagram to show you, but draw up like a window pane and divide it into 4 quadrants. Could be some overlaps going on in here. As I said, all indigenous music basically falls into fine art. That's easy to put it over there. Probably the latest stuff you're hearing on an FM rock channel automatically will fit into, initially anyway, and I'm not saying this can't change, will initially fit into the commercial. It's for mass appeal of a current population, really, and it's also, don't forget, it's plugged. Some classical music written will also fall into subjective. It will be a subjective experience for a few people. I may never see the light of day until archaeologists dig up something 2,000 years' time and just sit there bewildered. And some abstract music becomes into the mainstream. So Rite of Spring, totally rejected pre-World War One, and it was a hit after World War One. The world had to change, and unfortunately World War One did some dramatic changes. So the Romantic era dead and gone, and this 20th century composition coming in. So I think there's a bit of a mix mash here, a potpourri, if you like. As I said, subjective art, objective art, commercial art, and fine art. But one defining feature of fine art is it doesn't have to tick the commercial viability box at all at the time. And maybe some of you would be surprised to learn that Mozart wrote a piano concerto which wasn't taken very well by the people who organised the piano company. It was based a German piano player that commissioned him to do the work, and after his death, post his life, and I think it was a duration of 10 years, it became well known. So commercial art is different. If you write a piano piece and it's not up and got stats, you haven't ticked that box. So there you go. There's something in saying that the fine art doesn't have to. An indigenous culture in Peru can do their traditional and tribal custom and way that's been going on and handed down for generation. That's fine art as well. Somebody writes something very obscure, avant-garde, jazz or classical, it's not going to tick the commercial box, so it can't be commercial music. So it's pretty easy to define some of these straight away. What about a pop song that's not only lasted the time, but 40, 50 years, and that's what I brought in the discussion. Well, is it a matter that 40 or 50 years is enough, or about 300 years? Will they still be singing "We Are the Champion" as a classic rock song? So they have a little subgenre, classic rock, and it's possible that they are, because it's possible that could be regarded, and then you move that into perhaps the fine arts category. And by then it's nothing to do with the record sales. By then it's just that it's a part of the cultural folklore. Yeah. So I'm sure everyone's got different opinions on it. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just getting you to think, because a lot of people don't think. I think, what a statement, about, oh, I'm hearing something, I'm enjoying it, and that's as far as they need to go. That's where they want to go. But as a composer, somebody who plays a bit of commercial music, plays a bit of abstract music, plays avant-garde jazz, plays traditional jazz, dabbles in some classical, writes orchestral, and ties that in with my whole experience of what art is, I think it's an interesting topic. And if you've tuned into this and you've sat through this long enough, it might provoke something of your own thinking. But I certainly am not writing most of the classical stuff I'm doing, which is not a good business plan. I'm not actually writing it for a commercial short-term gain. And having said that, yes, if somebody loved it and gave me $500,000 for a major concerto or something, I would not say no. But that's not. I can get up and start writing because of inspiration. So that almost ticks some other boxes in the fine arts category as well. Anyway, we can go on and on, but we're not going to. That's enough for this session. And I'll just do my sign off, and I wish everybody peace, love, happiness, and keep on keeping on. Just keep bouncing. If it's a bad time for you at the moment, it will get better. And if you're having a really good time, savor the moment, because you've got to weather the other times. That's what life is. All right, signing off.